Sorry, I was sanitizing my hands. That is why I came in a bit late. Alright, so in our previous episode, we talked about adverbs where we actually talked about the definition, the forms, and then the examples of adverb. And then we also talked about some of the types of adverbs. Right now, we are moving on to what or where we ended. Then we pick it up from there. In our previous episode, we talked about 3 types or kinds of adverbs. We talked about adverb of manner, adverb of place, and adverb of degree. Now we are talking about adverb of time. So what at all is an adverb of time? You see, an adverb of time tells us something about the time or period that something happens. It tells us something about the time or period that something happens. Adverb of time modifies or mainly modifies verbs. Adverb of time mainly modifies verbs, just like adverb of manner. They can answer the question when. When did it happen? Example, he came yesterday. He came yesterday. When did he come? Yesterday. Yesterday here is telling us when the coming was done. In our next example, I want it now. I want it now. When do I want it? Now. That is an adverb of time. To our next type, we are talking about adverb of frequency. Adverb of frequency. And this particular type of adverb is having a relation with adverb of time. That's why we say they are adverbs of time. That answers the question, how frequently or how often. How frequently or how often. They tell us how often something happens. How often something happens. And then examples. We have example. We have grouped them into 2 different examples. We have daily, weekly, yearly. You can have monthly, annually, etc. So, most companies pay taxes yearly. How often do they pay the taxes? Yearly. Don't forget, it answers the question how often or how frequently. The facilitators meet weekly to discuss progress. The facilitators meet weekly to discuss progress. How often or how frequently do the facilitators meet? That is weekly. To the next group of examples, often, sometimes, rarely, etc. We see them rarely. How often do we see them? Rarely. The next example, sometimes they come and stay with us. When do they come and stay with us? Sometimes. I know you might be thinking why we have grouped these examples into 2. Since they are all under adverb of frequency. Now here is the explanation to what you are thinking. If you take a critical look at these examples, they tell us the exact frequency of things happening. Most companies pay taxes yearly. So here we can see that it is definite. We know the exact frequency at which the taxes are paid. But when you look at this, we see them rarely. How often do we see them? Rarely. It doesn't usually happen. We don't even know the exact point or the exact frequency at which we see them. So in the first group, we refer to them as the definite adverb of frequency. Definite adverb of frequency. And the second group is the indefinite adverb of frequency. So under adverb of frequency, we have two different examples. That is adverb definite and then indefinite. So take note of these. I hope you are enjoying this lesson and you are really catching up. Alright, we move on to our main or our maiden topic under this, or subtopic under adverbs. That is comparison of adverbs. Here it is very simple. Just as we did comparison of adjectives, the same way we can compare adverbs. So under adverbs, there are 3 degrees of comparison in adverbs, just like adjectives. We have the positive, the comparative, and the superlative. So the one-syllable adverbs use ER in the comparative form. When you are forming the comparative of adverb, just as we did in the comparative of adjectives, we add ER to a one-syllable adverb to form the comparative, and then we add EST in the superlative form. I hope you have remembered what we did in adjectives. If you have not, then kindly revisit your adjective lesson. Alright, secondly, adverbs that end in ly. Adverbs that end in ly. That is mostly formed from adjectives. Those that are mostly formed from adjectives ending in ly, they use the words more and most to form their comparatives and superlatives, respectively. So we use the more for comparative and most for superlatives. These adverbs usually have more than one syllable. The adverbs that end in ly, they usually have more than one syllable. Alright. Let's look at some examples of the one-syllable adverbs. One-syllable adverbs. Under positive, we have early. Note, don't ask why ly is here and we are not using more and then the most. We said one syllable. Early is a one-syllable word. Alright. So early, the comparative. We use ER and then be mindful. We have already said that if the word ends in Y, we change the Y to I before we add the ER. That is why early is having earlier, and then the superlative is earliest. Earliest. Fast, faster, fastest. Hard, harder, hardest. High, higher, highest. Sorry, there should be an H here. High, higher, highest. Late, later, latest. Late, later, latest. Loud, louder, loudest. Near, nearer, nearest. Soon, sooner, soonest. These are some examples of the positive, comparative, and then the superlative forms of a one-syllable adverb. Next, adverbs that end in ly or have 3 or more syllables. Under positive, we can have angrily. Angrily. Comparative, more angrily. Superlative, most angrily. Brightly, more brightly, most brightly. Freely, more freely, most freely. Gladly, more gladly, most gladly. Heavily, more heavily, most heavily. Loudly, more loudly, most loudly. Quietly, more quietly, most quietly. Sweetly, more sweetly, most sweetly. Terribly, more terribly, most terribly. These are just but a few of the list of adverbs that end in ly, their comparative and their superlative forms. You can go on and list a lot of them. Some adverbs form their comparatives and superlatives irregularly. Some of them, they don't follow the previous two rules. Examples are badly, worse, worst. Far, farther, furthest. Or the same far, it can be further, furthest. Little, less, least. Much or many, more, most. Well, better, best. So these are just but a few lists of irregular adverbs, their comparatives and their superlative forms. Note this. The comparative form is used to compare two things. Comparative form is used to compare only two things. The positive form is used to describe only one thing. Comparative, comparing two things. Example, you speak more loudly than a loudspeaker. You speak more loudly than a loudspeaker. You and then loudspeaker. These are the two things we are comparing. So, more loudly than a loudspeaker. We must not reach there later than 7 o'clock. So we choose 7 o'clock and any other time. So two things. 7 o'clock and any other time. Alright. Now the superlative form too is used to compare 3 or more things. The superlative form is used to compare 3 or more things. Example, he arrived the earliest, so he had to wait for the others. Probably, there were more than 3 people meeting, but then he alone arrived earliest. So earliest here is comparing more than 2 people. Alright, why do you have to speak the most loudly of all at the meeting? Why do you have to speak the most loudly of all at the meeting? At a meeting, there will probably be more than 2 people at the meeting. But in this particular sentence, it appears that only one of them is always loud. So in comparing how loud they speak, that particular person is singled out of the lot. So most loudly of all. It has been nice coming your way in this particular episode. Until we meet again in our 7th episode, make sure you answer all the questions that have been given and keep practicing the comparative or comparison of adverbs. We shall meet again in the 7th episode. Watch out. But until we meet, stay home, stay safe, learn and read a lot. Don't forget to wash your hands with soap and running water. This too shall pass.